In the heart of the Libyan desert, where the wind brings no promises and the silence seems to carry the weight of generations, there lies a city almost invisible to the hurried eyes of the world. Mizdah, with its dusty structures and dry horizon, rests like an open scar on the map of North Africa. At first glance, those who pass through may think that nothing happens there, that time has stopped, that life merely resists. But behind the curtains of dust and the silent facades, a reality pulses that is as harsh as it is hidden, where freedom still has a price, and human beings are still reduced to the condition of merchandise. It's hard to believe, but in the 21st century, the shadow of slavery still hovers over Mizdah. This is not a metaphor or a distant historical memory. It is a real, brutal, and silent system that feeds on the vulnerability of others. Men, women, and even children who were only seeking a route to Europe end up trapped in a cycle of exploitation that begins with promises and ends with invisible chains. They are intercepted by criminal networks that have turned desperation into profit. In makeshift camps without law or protection, bodies become digits, and dreams become bargaining chips. On the roadside connecting Tripoli to Sabah, the marks in the ground tell stories few have the courage to hear. Truck tracks hastily dug holes, plastic tents defying the hot wind. There, human dignity evaporates like water under the Sahara sun. Modern slave markets have no auctioneers or elevated stages. Everything happens in silence, in the shadows. A signal, a glance, a gesture, and a life changes hands. Those watching from afar pretend not to see. Those nearby have no choice. And those inside have often already lost the right to speak. Mizdah doesn't appear in tourist brochures. There are no colorful videos or trending hashtags. But it's there, firm, surviving in the cracks of geopolitics and international indifference. It is a city that houses broken dreams and tired bodies. A city where every wall carries secrets, where every night might be someone's last who simply wanted to cross a border in search of a better life. The desert crossing becomes a trap, and those who try to escape find in Mizdah a labyrinth without exit. Some arrive from Ghana, others from Nigeria, Sudan, Eritrea. Every face has a story, every look carries unanswered questions. Many paid everything they had to smugglers, hoping to reach the coast and embark toward Italy. But they were deceived, sold, traded, kept in makeshift captivity where food is rationed. Water is a luxury, and hope is an endangered commodity. They live under tarps or in holes dug into the desert, under armed watch, without access to the outside world. And even so, they wake up every day with a remnant of faith that someone, somewhere, will care. There are reports of beatings, of extortion for ransom, of torture broadcasted via cell phone to force families to send money, of women raped and children separated from their parents. The suffering is managed like a business, meticulously. There's no chaos, there is method. The captors know the language of fear and know how to use it. But even in the midst of such darkness, there are survivors who carry a silent flame in their hearts. People who sing softly so as not to lose their minds. People who dream of a tomorrow that doesn't yet have a name. And it is in this violent contradiction that Mizdah reveals itself. A place where horror coexists with faith, where silence shelters muffled screams, and where life insists on not dying. Those who have escaped the clutches of human trafficking tell, with sunken eyes and hushed voices, what it's like to survive in a place where your worth is measured by your weight. What it's like to not know if you'll see the next sunset. What it's like to depend on the compassion of strangers to escape the worst. But Mizdah is not only pain. In its dusty alleys, there are also small acts of resistance. Some local residents silently hide fugitives. Others leave bottles of water near the camps. There are doctors who treat the wounded without asking names. There are mothers who share what little they have with children who are not theirs. Because even amid hell, humanity finds cracks through which it can breathe. Mizdah is also made of these cracks. The eyes of the world, however, almost never turn toward it. The international media says little. Local authorities pretend not to see, and humanitarian organizations, when they manage to enter, face constant threats. The modern slave market is silent because it is convenient. Because to expose it is to touch on interests, on migration routes, on truths too uncomfortable for headlines. And that is why telling this story is urgent. It is necessary. It is an act of justice. You who have come this far need to know. Every word you read is a mirror of a reality that persists. And perhaps, by learning this story, you cannot change it immediately. But you can spread it. You can give voice to those who were silenced. You can turn forgetting into memory. Because to ignore is to permit. And to permit is to be complicit. Between the narrow and dusty alleys of the outskirts of Mizdah, life moves with the slow pace of someone carrying the weight of the world on their back. There are no flashy signs, no bright shop windows, only the sound of dry wind and the clinking of chains that aren't on feet, but on decisions. In a corner of the city, an improvised warehouse serves as shelter for dozens of young people who were captured along migration routes. They don't speak to each other. Some pray. Others simply stare at the ground, as if they wanted to bury themselves deeper than the city itself. The language there is different. It's made of fear, of silence, of eyes that avoid meeting other eyes. Outside, pickup trucks drive by with armed men, faces covered, neutral expressions. They don't shout, don't run, show no hurry. They know the system well, and they know that the despair of those imprisoned works in favor of the business. The sun burns the skin and confuses time. 1 hour feels like an entire day. Those imprisoned by trafficking networks often don't know if it's Monday or Friday, if weeks or months have passed. The internal clock freezes, and the body merely survives on autopilot. The detention points are, most of the time, camouflaged excavations, basements and abandoned houses, underground silos, garages that appear empty but hide dozens of people. The structure is precarious, bathrooms don't exist, and the stench is constant. Those who manage these prisons profit from each prisoner. They sell fake tickets to Europe, charge for food, and threaten families in the country of origin with videos recorded on cell phones. A young man from Chad, his bones protruding beneath his skin, murmurs that his mother sold everything she had to pay the ransom. The money was sent. He wasn't released. And now no one answers the messages anymore. At times, the captives are visited by buyers. They don't introduce themselves as such. They merely observe, ask quick questions, touch arms and shoulders as if evaluating merchandise. There's an implicit pricing table. Strong men cost more. Young women have another price. Children, sadly, have a specific market, even more cruel and invisible. When a deal is made, the prisoner is removed. They never return. No one knows if they were sold, killed, or transferred. The doubt corrodes more than a known fate. The guards are, more often than not, also victims of the system. Many are young Libyans or coerced migrants, forced to watch over others under threats to their own families. Some try to help, hide water, facilitate discreet escapes. But when discovered, they disappear. The hierarchy is clear. Those who profit are at the top. Those who bleed are at the bottom. And the desert swallows everyone without a sound. The heat is a constant that gives no respite. The temperature inside the hideouts can surpass 50 degrees Celsius. Without ventilation, with few bottles of water rationed among dozens, bodies collapse. Many faint. Some die. Those who survive develop physical resilience, but the mind gradually breaks into invisible pieces. Trauma settles like a permanent visitor. Even those who manage to leave one day carry scars that can't be seen. Recurring nightmares, panic at loud voices, chronic distrust. What's surprising is that even in this hell disguised as a city, moments of humanity arise. A man from Somalia shares his last piece of bread with an 8-year-old boy. A woman quietly sings songs from her village to calm those crying. A group improvises joint prayers, each in their own language, but with the same request: not to be forgotten. In those moments, pain becomes connection. And Mizdah, for brief instance, remembers what it means to be a community. The local economy, in turn, partially revolves around this tragedy. Mechanical workshops repair the smugglers' vehicles. Markets supply food packaged in bulk for the camps. Some rent out land or buildings knowing exactly what they'll be used for. It's not that the entire city is directly involved, but the logic of survival makes many look the other way. Mizdah lives in fear. Not just the migrants, but also the residents, because speaking up, reporting, or trying to stop it can mean the end of one's own family. There are also zones in Mizdah that appear normal. Simple cafes showing European soccer on TV, children playing ball on dirt fields, women going to the market with colorful headscarves. This parallel normality creates one of the biggest contradictions. How can so much pain and so much everyday life coexist in the same space? The answer lies in fragmentation. Each piece of Mizdah lives its own reality, and few dare to look at the others. It's easier to pretend not to know. Some international NGOs try to operate in the region, but Libya's political instability makes everything extremely risky. Humanitarian missions are blocked, vehicles are intercepted, and volunteers often disappear. Attempts to map prisoner camps are systematically thwarted. Even the definition of camp is fluid. Any house can become a prison. Any warehouse, a trafficking hub. And so the system remains invisible, effective, undead. Migrants, before reaching Mizdah, endure a long journey across the Sahel. Many are deceived from the start, believing they'll reach Europe in just a few days. They're abandoned at borders, forced to walk for days through the desert. Some are captured by militias during the crossing. Others are sold from group to group, as if on a roulette wheel of horrors. Mizdah then becomes not a destination, but an abyss along the way. Even so, there are still those who believe. Those who look at the night sky, between one punishment and another, and whisper prayers to a God who seems distant. Those who, even weak, try to comfort someone weaker still. Those who dream of seeing their mother again, of stepping on Italian soil, of studying engineering, of getting married one day. These dreams don't die, they merely sleep, waiting for a chance. A miracle. A gesture. On the dry outskirts of the city, where the wind lifts sand and hides footprints, there are paths found on no map. These are clandestine routes, created by smugglers to evade sporadic patrols and unwanted eyes. Along these trails, every day, new faces arrive. Young people from Eritrea, Sudan, Niger. They carry little more than faith. Hope, though wounded, still beats. But as they walk those paths, it begins to unravel, like a thread pulled from an old garment. Mizdah swallows them. Slowly, first with promises, then with threats. The entry into these labyrinths of pain almost always begins with a verbal agreement. A smuggler presents himself as a guide. He guarantees safe passage to Europe, says everything will be quick, that people are already waiting in Tripoli, that the boat leaves in 2 days. But instead of taking them to the coast, he delivers them to local groups in Mizdah, like someone delivering a parcel. It is at that moment that dreams change names. They begin to be called debt. And debt, there, means captivity. A 3x4 meter room accommodates 27 people. There are no windows. A bucket in the corner serves as a bathroom. A hole in the ceiling allows light in for 3 hours a day. People sleep sitting. They speak little. Any sudden movement can be interpreted as insubordination. Some have their feet tied. Others bear visible marks of whipping. Inside these suffocating spaces, days become indistinguishable. The sounds are muffled, but the screams, those pierce through walls. Not everyone can bear it. There have been cases of young men throwing themselves repeatedly against the wall until they bled, just to get out of there, even if the exit was an improvised hospital with an uncertain destination. Some try to escape but are recaptured and punished publicly. To serve as an example, the punishments are not just physical. Humiliation, deprivation of water, isolation in even smaller spaces. The jailers know that breaking the mind is more effective than hurting the body. Still, there are survivors who describe a silent code among the prisoners. Signals with the eyes, discreet touches on the back, rhythmic breathing during the night to calm one another. A system of resistance almost invisible, but vital. Solidarity there is not a luxury, it is an emotional survival mechanism. It's what prevents everything from becoming pure despair. Outside these modern dungeons, the city turns with apparent normality. Shops sell fruit, mosques fill with worshippers on Fridays. But there are neighborhoods where no one enters without being summoned. Areas where cars with tinted windows have priority, and any outside interference is repelled with hostility. These are the territories where trafficking becomes a structured business. In these places, Mizdah is not just a city, it is a logistical knot of suffering. The link between human trafficking and armed groups is explicit. Militias, often connected to former tribal commands or political factions, use control of migration routes as a source of funding. They sell protection, rent captivity spaces, negotiate with networks outside the country. And because there is no strong central government, all this happens without real punishment. Libya, fragmented since the fall of Gaddafi, has become fertile ground for networks that turn despair into profit. Some of the younger prisoners are forced to work in regional quarries. They extract stones under scorching sun, barefoot, in exchange for a bottle of water. Others are put to work washing vehicles or cleaning homes of wealthier organization members. They receive scraps. When they question it, they hear the same reply: "You're paying your debt." The problem is that debt never ends. Every cup of water, every bite of bread, is tallied. The ransom becomes unreachable. Families in the countries of origin receive terrifying phone calls. Voices in Arabic, sometimes in rudimentary French, demand money. They send videos of the captives crying, begging. Some mothers sell their homes, their land, everything, to save their child, only to later discover the requested amount was just the first payment. The negotiation continues. The promise of freedom is never fulfilled. And those who try to report it find the network is larger than imagined, reaching even neighboring countries. Among local residents, there are those who refuse to take part. Some religious leaders preach against trafficking. Small associations try to offer shelter or escape routes, but they are few. Most fear retaliation. Silence in Mizdah is a form of collective survival. Those who speak too much disappear. Those who help too much are punished. And so the city sinks into an undeclared pact. Better not to see, better not to know. But amid this cruel landscape, there are flashes of resistance that become local legends. Stories are told of a young man who escaped and led 10 others to a refugee camp in the south, or of the nurse who, with the help of residents, transported migrants hidden in coffins, pretending to be corpses. These stories spread in whispers. They fuel hope. They show that not everyone has given up fighting the system. Tension in Mizdah is constant. The city's sounds change tone at night. Cars speeding down dirt roads, distant gunfire, muffled voices. In Arabic and French, fear installs itself in the body like a constant chill, even under 40 degrees. People walk quickly, avoid eye contact. Everyone knows something happens there. But the fear of naming it is greater than the need to understand. In the improvised camps on the outskirts, there are shacks made of tarpaulin, pieces of metal, old clothes serving as doors. There, entire families live who haven't been captured, but are not free either. They are in eternal transit, waiting for the moment to try crossing the country again. In these camps, hunger is not a concept, it is routine. Children with sunken eyes, swollen bellies, and voices that only whisper. Even among the traffickers, there are divisions. Some, older, act like mafia bosses. Others are young, armed, impulsive, treating people like numbers. But there are those who show signs of inner conflict. A guard who hesitates before hitting, a smuggler who cries alone. They are exceptions. But they prove that even in the mud, traces of humanity still exist, buried, suppressed, but alive. The city's relationship with the outside world is unstable. The Libyan government, weak and divided, does little. Major powers watch from a distance. They know what is happening. But Libya, strategic for its oil reserves and geographic location, is too sensitive a piece for deep interference. And so Mizdah goes on the map, a common city. Underground, a center of pain. When the sun sets, the desert slowly cools. And inside the hideouts, there are those who look up at the ceiling of dirt and imagine the sea, Europe, a train, a table, with bread and laughter. They imagine freedom as if it were a color they've never seen. Mizdah is a place where the dream does not die. It merely survives like a held breath, waiting for the right moment to be heard again. The road that leads to Mizdah, when seen from above, is just a crooked line in the desert. But for those who travel it, it becomes a rite of passage, not toward freedom, but toward submission. Many migrants say the hardest path isn't the one between them and Europe, but the one that separates them from their own dignity. In Mizdah, that distance is measured in muffled screams, imposed silence, and eyes that avoid the mirror. There, even reflections seem to disappear over time. In the heart of the city, there are markets selling fresh fruit, fabrics, and household items. But there are also, hidden between alleys and shuttered warehouses, markets where human lives are traded like objects. These auctions, held far from Western eyes, hold no taboo. A young body is worth more. Women are assessed by their strength, endurance, and docility. Everything is measured: teeth, skin, willingness to obey. And whoever pays the asking price gains absolute control over the other. No contract, no record. Just possession. The voices in these markets are not loud. They are murmured. Words exchanged in Arabic and French, while the product stands still. Eyes downcast, under threat. Some buyers come from nearby cities, others from outside Libya. The root of despair feeds a transnational network of exploitation. Victims rarely return. Those who disappear in Mizdah become faceless absences, names, with no destination. Families in distant countries keep waiting for messages that never arrive. Among the few who escaped and could speak, the stories are always fragmented, memories mixed with fear. Many lost track of time. I don't know how long I was there, they say. The light never changed. One survivor said that for weeks, he heard the same song repeatedly coming from the floor above. The song became a marker of time. I knew it was a new day when it played. And still, he preferred the sound to total silence, because silence, in that place, was a warning that something terrible was about to happen. Those who try to escape face the desert. A sea of sand that punishes even the most prepared. Little water, unbearable heat by day, and freezing cold at night. Some try to walk to remote villages seeking shelter. Others wander aimlessly, hoping to stumble upon someone willing to help. But armed checkpoints make any attempt difficult. And when someone is recaptured, the return is crueler than the initial arrival. Mizdah punishes those who dare to dream of freedom. On the outskirts of the city, between ruins and makeshift camps, unexpected bonds of solidarity emerge. Women share crumbs of bread with other mothers. Children divide water from a single bottle, drop by drop. Small gestures that anywhere else would seem ordinary, but there, they become heroic. The simple act of sharing is in Mizdah, a form of resistance against a system that tries to erase identity. Faith endures as well. Many migrants pray in silence, discreetly, heads bowed. Some pray in languages the jailers don't understand. Others improvise community worship in the shadows, reciting memorized passages from the Bible or the Quran. Religion is not just comfort. It's a tool for psychological survival. A reminder that, though forgotten by the world, they still belong to something greater than that captivity. In certain parts of the city, there are small improvised hospitals, dark rooms with broken beds, and few medicines. There appear the most injured bodies. The marks are not only physical, some no longer speak. Others tremble at the sight of any authority figure. There are volunteer doctors who risk themselves to care for wounds there, not sure they can heal, and still, they return day after day, because they know that for those prisoners, a bandage might mean more than relief. It might mean hope. The youth of Mizdah grow up in this ambiguous environment. Some children of traffickers begin to question the source of the comfort they live in. They ask too many questions and are silenced. Others, out of fear, learn early to collaborate. They become lookouts, messengers, accomplices. And within a few years, they are leading new networks, repeating the cycle. The city, like a sick organism, feeds itself. Suffering recycles into new forms of control. Despite that, there are stories of rupture. A teenager, son of one of the bosses, fled to Tripoli and denounced his own family. The story was never confirmed by authorities, but it circulates among refugees as a symbol that it is possible to break the cycle. There are also reports of drivers who, in exchange for nothing, take migrants to safer villages. People who risk everything, their families, their belongings for a stranger. The world watches from afar. NGOs denounce it, journalists try to cover it, but access to the city is nearly impossible. Mizdah is shielded by militias and protected by distance. Even with satellite images and UN warnings, little is done. International diplomacy fluctuates between public outrage and practical inaction. And the city remains there, surviving scandals, keeping a discreet appearance, and hiding beneath its ground the screams no one wants to hear. The currency circulating in these corridors of exploitation is not just money. It's fear, it's power, it's silence bought. Human trafficking generates more profit than drug trafficking and carries fewer risks. Those who control Mizdah know this, and they are in no hurry. They control the routes, the means, and above all, the narrative. They create versions of the facts. They threaten witnesses. They bribe authorities. They erase traces with surgical precision. Many who have been through Mizdah don't know how to explain how they are still alive. They say surviving there is more luck than merit. At any moment, you could be next. That phrase echoes in almost every testimony. And that constant uncertainty may be the most inhuman aspect of all. Because it prevents the future. It freezes time. It makes life into a space with no horizon line. Trafficking is not the only problem. There's also forced labor, compulsory marriage, imposed prostitution. Girls aged 13, 14 are sold as wives to men who promise protection. The protection, however, is just another form of prison. And amid all this, childhood vanishes. In Mizdah, it is common to see girls with eyes that have seen more than they should. Girls who don't know how to play because they never learned. Clandestine radios still operate, even with interference. On clear nights, some manage to hear voices from afar. Encoded messages from relatives, prayers broadcast with urgency. These signals keep the idea of something beyond alive. They are small lights in the dark brief, but intense enough to rekindle the desire to leave. For some, they are the only connection to the real world. Art also survives, even in pieces. Drawings scratched onto walls, verses written on old napkins, songs murmured before sleep. Art in Mizdah is clandestine, but it does not fall silent. It records what the newspapers ignore. It gives name to what the system wants to keep invisible. And above all, it reminds everyone inside that they are still human. Still feel, still dream. In rare moments, there is laughter. It emerges like sparks in the darkness. A whispered joke, a good memory, a story told in someone's ear. In those moments, Mizdah seems suspended by a thread of humanity. Fragile, but Mizdah doesn't appear on postcards. It's not the subject of acclaimed documentaries, nor a frequent topic in international news, but it pulses like an open wound in modern history. A city where pain is not an accident, but a method. Where violence is not the exception, but the mechanism. And yet, where the human being, in some almost inexplicable way, insists on continuing to exist. It is in this brutal contrast that the true complexity of life in Mizdah lies, between barbarity and hope, between forced submission and dreamed freedom. The city doesn't apologize for existing the way it does. Because for it, this way of existing wasn't a choice. It was a consequence. Of wars, of failed borders, of shady interests hidden under the pretext of security or stability. Mizdah is the rawest portrait of what happens when the world closes its eyes for too long, when silence becomes complicity, when lives turn into statistics, and statistics no longer shock. In the basements where bodies are locked up, the future cannot be heard. But it still breathes. In the form of a sigh, a contained tear, a name carved on a piece of wood hidden beneath a mattress. The future there doesn't scream, but it resists. It doesn't impose itself, but it refuses to die. Mizdah, with all its brutality, has not managed to kill what is most precious in human beings, the ability to imagine a different tomorrow. And that's what makes it all even more powerful. Because every time a child learns to write their own name in the dry sands of the city, something happens. Something no trafficker, militia member, or exploiter can stop. A tiny but definitive break with the logic of captivity. Education, even if improvised, even if forbidden, is the most dangerous weapon inside the caves of Mizdah. There are mothers who teach their children to count to 10, even if they've never read a book. There are fathers who build toys from scraps of wood and metal, just to remind their children that they still have a right to laughter. And there are young people who, even wounded, still ask about the world beyond. They don't just want to escape, they want to understand. They want to participate. They want to live as people, not as cargo. And in that silent desire lies the loudest cry Mizdah can offer the world. Because it's a cry that doesn't depend on microphones, headlines, or cameras. It's an ancestral cry, buried in the chests of the oppressed for generations. A cry that says, we exist, we feel, we are still here. And that, in itself, is already a revolution. Walking through the city's alleys, even those where sunlight barely reaches, it's possible to find symbols. A heart scribbled on a wall. A piece of cloth with the colors of some flag. A note buried under a stone. Each of these gestures is a document. A reminder that no one there has been completely erased. That there is memory, identity, and history, even if they are being erased at every moment. And when the eyes of someone from outside meet the eyes of someone inside, something breaks. The distance, the myth, the indifference. That's why so many try to avoid that contact. Because once you look inside Mizdah, it's impossible to come out unscathed. The city wounds those who witness it, but it also heals. It heals ignorance. It heals selfishness. It heals the illusion that evil is always far from us. In the early hours of the morning, when the desert falls silent, some lights blink and improvised. Windows, sometimes it's a hidden cell phone, turned on for just a few seconds. Sometimes it's a candle lit in memory of someone who is gone. Sometimes it's just the attempt to keep some spark alive. Because in Mizdah, even the smallest glimmer can be a beacon. And the smallest gesture can be resistance. There are those who write songs about what they live there. Songs whispered in mixed languages filled with pain and beauty. And these songs cross borders. They end up in the headphones of people who have never set foot in a desert. They end up in playlists of resistance. And thus Mizdah sings, not with pride, but with the courage of those who survive. The city won't be remembered for its buildings, nor for its monuments, but for the lives that refused to become invisible, for the stories that insisted on existing, even without space to be told, and for the weight it carries as a symbol of what still needs to change, urgently, profoundly, humanely. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you also refuses to pretend you didn't see. Because sometimes knowing is already the first step, and speaking, the second. So let this story not end in this paragraph. Let it begin there, in your mouth, in your fingers, in your choice to share. Because Mizdah needs to be exposed. It needs to be understood. It needs to be remembered. The hardest chains to break are not made of iron. They're made of forgetting. And every time the world turns away, a city like Mizdah sinks deeper into the abyss. But every time someone pays attention, a chance is created, a light turns on, and a new possibility is born. So don't ignore it, don't forget. And above all, don't be silent. As long as there's a city where human beings are treated like merchandise, we all have something to do. It doesn't matter the distance, the language, or the culture. Pain, at this level, is universal. And so is the responsibility. Mizdah can no longer remain just a dirty secret among traffickers. It needs to become a global outcry. This is not just about compassion. It's about justice. It's about preventing future generations from normalizing the unacceptable. It's about restoring the dignity that was stolen from thousands. And ensuring that, even in forgotten places, humanity remains the rule, not the exception. May every word spoken here not be lost in the wind. May every image evoked remain. And may you, now that you know this reality, be the bridge between silence and truth. Be a voice. Be memory. Be action. Share this story.